My dad's wife destroyed my late mom's wedding dress and smiled while doing it. A dress that I was saving for my own wedding to fulfill my mom's dying wish. It wasn't just fabric or lace, it was the last piece of her I had, the only thing that still smelled faintly of her perfume, like roses and powder. I kept it in a cedar chest in our beach house, exactly where Mom wanted it to rest, under sunlight and salt air she once loved. Welcome to Raw Reddit Tales. Subscribe to keep getting the spiciest stories on Light Buzzed. After Mom passed, Dad remarried quicker than anyone expected. Her name was Lillian, the kind of woman who smiled too wide and touched things that didn't belong to her. She'd call me sweetheart, but there was always that sharp edge underneath, the type that sounded kind but cut deep. When she asked if she and Dad could use the beach house for a little getaway, I agreed. I wanted to believe she was finally trying to make peace. 2 days later, I got a call. Her tone was fake calm, too smooth. "Honey, there's been a tiny accident. A fire, but don't panic. Everyone's fine." Then she hesitated before adding, "The wedding dress, it didn't make it." The world went silent. My chest felt like it caved in. I couldn't even cry, just drove numb until I reached the beach house. But when I stepped inside, I froze. The house was untouched. No smoke, no soot, not even the faint smell of fire. The only thing ruined was the cedar chest. The lid was open, the satin melted into ash, but the curtains, the floor, the rug, all perfect. Dad told me to let it go, said it was an accident. But when Lillian hugged me, I swear she smirked. It was the kind of smile that said she knew exactly what she'd done, and she wasn't sorry. That night, I stood in the ruins of my mother's memory and made myself one promise. I was going to find out why. The next morning, I woke up with that same bitter taste of disbelief. I kept replaying Lillian's words in my head, "tiny accident." The way she said it didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like victory. I went back to the beach house alone. The police had already cleared it, called it a minor electrical malfunction. But I knew that house, every inch. I'd spent summers there with Mom, running barefoot on the wooden floors while she painted by the window. There was no faulty wiring in that room. As I stepped inside, something felt off. The chest was gone. Not burned, not broken. Gone. I searched every corner until I saw it tucked into the hallway closet, wrapped in a plastic bag. The lock had been sawed off. My heart hammered. The air smelled faintly of smoke and something chemical, lighter fluid. That wasn't an accident. Someone had wanted that fire. When I confronted my dad, he looked tired. "She didn't mean it, sweetheart," he said, rubbing his temples. "She was cleaning, bumped something, and..." "Cleaning?" I cut him off. "With gasoline?" He didn't answer, just sighed, and I noticed the way his hands shook. That's when it hit me. He already knew. He wasn't defending her out of love. He was defending her out of guilt. That evening, I went to their house. Lillian was in the kitchen, humming, slicing lemons like nothing happened. "You came by?" she said without even looking up. "I thought you'd need space to grieve. Again." The word "again" sliced through me. "You didn't just ruin a dress," I said quietly. "You ruined her memory." She set the knife down slowly, turned, and met my eyes. "Your mother's memory doesn't live in a dress," she whispered. "It lives in you, and maybe that's what needs fixing." It took everything in me not to scream. Her tone was calm, but there was a darkness behind it, like she wanted me to break, to lose control. I have to become the villain in my own story. That night, I found a photo online. Lillian, at the same beach house 2 days before the accident. She was wearing a white dress, my mother's dress, and she was smiling. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, my mother, standing in that same dress, sunlight catching the lace, her laughter soft and warm like waves brushing the shore. She'd always said that beach house was her quiet place, the one corner of the world where she could breathe without noise or judgment. Losing her had already taken that peace away once. Losing her dress felt like losing her all over again. Mom died 5 years ago. A car accident, late night, rain-slick roads, and a drunk driver who walked away with barely a scratch. She was on her way home from work, after picking up the very same dress from the preservation shop. I was the one who answered the phone that night. I was 23, sitting in my dorm room, planning a surprise visit home. When the officer said her name, my body went cold. For months, I blamed myself for not being there, for not saying goodbye, for not convincing her to stay one more night. That guilt never left. Welcome to Raw Reddit Tales. Subscribe to keep getting the spiciest stories by Silpley. After she passed, I became obsessed with preserving everything she touched. Her journals, her perfumes, even her coffee mug. But the dress was sacred. She'd made me promise that if she never lived to see my wedding, I'd wear her dress. That way, she'd said, tucking a curl behind my ear, I'll still be there, walking with you. And now that promise was gone, burned by a woman who smiled through her lies. I stared at that photo of Lillian wearing Mom's gown, zooming in until every pixel blurred. The beach house behind her looked untouched, the sun glowing on her skin. Her hand rested on my father's chest, his arm around her waist. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't stopping her either. My chest tightened. Was it possible Dad knew before I did? Did he stand there while she wore it, pretending not to see how wrong it was? I drove to the cemetery the next day, knelt by Mom's grave, and whispered through tears, I'm sorry, Mom. I failed you. But the breeze that brushed my cheek felt sharp, like a warning instead of comfort. Because when I got home that evening, a package was waiting at my door. No name, no note. Just a small velvet box. Inside it was a single scorched pearl button from my mother's dress. The moment I saw that pearl button, my hands began to shake. It was small but unmistakable. I'd seen it 1,000 times as a kid, running my fingers over the smooth, shiny row of buttons on the back of my mother's gown, each one hand-sewn by her own mother. Whoever sent that box wasn't taunting me randomly. They knew what that button meant. I turned the velvet box over and found something etched faintly into the lid. A date, August 14th. That was the night of the so-called fire. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had been there. Someone other than Lillian and Dad. I didn't go to the police. I didn't even tell my father. I needed proof before anyone tried to make me sound hysterical again. So I drove back to the beach house the next morning, before dawn, when the tide was still low. The air felt thick, heavy, with that briny scent that always reminded me of Mom. I stepped inside quietly, afraid that even my footsteps might wake the ghosts that lingered there. As I searched the closet where the cedar chest had been, I noticed something buried in the corner, half hidden beneath a folded sheet. It was a small, burned piece of paper. I picked it up carefully, and my heart nearly stopped. It was the tag from a dry cleaner, dated 3 days before the fire. And on it, printed in neat block letters, Lillian C. Marlowe. She'd taken the dress out before that weekend. She hadn't just destroyed it, she'd worn it, maybe even flaunted it. I could almost hear her laughing as she called it an accident. That night I confronted my dad again. I dropped the dry cleaning tag onto the kitchen counter between us. She wore Mom's dress, I said, voice trembling, 3 days before the fire. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he whispered, I know. Those 2 words broke something inside me. He looked older, drained. She wanted to feel beautiful, he said quietly. It was supposed to be for a photo shoot. She promised she'd return it before you found out. My voice cracked. And when she burned it, he looked down at his hands. She said it was easier this way. The moment I saw that pearl button, my hands began to shake. It was small but unmistakable. I'd seen it 1,000 times as a kid, running my fingers over the smooth, shiny row of buttons on the back of my mother's gown, each one hand-sewn by her own mother. Whoever sent that box wasn't taunting me randomly. They knew what that button meant. I turned the velvet box over and found something etched faintly into the lid. A date, August 14th. That was the night of the so-called fire. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had been there. Someone other than Lillian and Dad. I didn't go to the police. I didn't even tell my father. I needed proof before anyone tried to make me sound hysterical again. So I drove back to the beach house the next morning, before dawn, when the tide was still low. The air felt thick, heavy, with that briny scent that always reminded me of Mom. I stepped inside quietly, afraid that even my footsteps might wake the ghosts that lingered there. As I searched the closet where the cedar chest had been, I noticed something buried in the corner, half hidden beneath a folded sheet. It was a small, burned piece of paper. I picked it up carefully, and my heart nearly stopped. It was the tag from a dry cleaner, dated 3 days before the fire. And on it, printed in neat block letters, Lillian C. Marlowe. She'd taken the dress out before that weekend. She hadn't just destroyed it, she'd worn it, maybe even flaunted it. I could almost hear her laughing as she called it an accident. That night, I confronted my dad again. I dropped the dry cleaning tag onto the kitchen counter between us. She wore Mom's dress, I said, voice trembling, 3 days before the fire. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he whispered, I know. Those 2 words broke something inside me. He looked older, drained. She wanted to feel beautiful, he said quietly. It was supposed to be for a photo shoot. She promised she'd return it before you found out. My voice cracked. And when she burned it, he looked down at his hands. She said it was easier this way. I stared at my dad, stunned. Easier this way? The words echoed like poison in my head. How could destroying my mother's wedding dress, her last wish, make anything easier? He wouldn't look at me, just sat there, his eyes wet, his shoulders sagging. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Then something caught my attention. A faint red mark on his wrist, thin, circular like a burn. What happened to your hand? I asked. He flinched, pulled it away. It's nothing, he said. But the lie was too quick, too polished. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about that mark. The photo, the box, the tag. It all added up to something bigger, something deliberate. I went digging through old files, Dad's, Mom's, even insurance papers. That's when I found it, a claim filed 2 weeks before the fire listing personal items damaged beyond repair. The payout, $30,000. The item listed first, wedding dress, vintage, custom, silk, sentimental. My stomach turned. He'd insured it. Not just that, he'd done it right after Lillian moved in. My chest tightened. You sold her memory, I whispered to myself. I called him the next morning, my voice cold. You took out insurance on Mom's dress. You both knew what would happen. There was silence on the line, then a sigh. You don't understand, he said. We needed money, medical bills, the mortgage. It was just a dress. Just a dress. That sentence snapped something in me I didn't even know was left. She trusted you, I said, and you let her die all over again. Later that night, I parked outside their house. The lights were off except for one upstairs window. Through it, I saw Lillian brushing her hair, wearing a silky white robe that shimmered under the lamp. My pulse raced as I realized it was made from the same fabric as my mother's gown. She hadn't destroyed all of it. She'd kept a piece, twisted it into her own vanity. As I watched her twirl before the mirror, smiling to herself, my grief burned into rage. She'd stolen my mother's legacy, paraded it in front of me, and my father had helped her. That's when I knew. The fire hadn't been the end, it had just been the start. The rage sat in my throat like smoke, thick and choking. I couldn't let it stay inside anymore. The lies, the betrayal, the way my father's wife had turned my mother's memory into ashes, it all boiled down to one moment. I had to face her. The next morning, I walked straight into their house. No knocking, no hesitation. Dad was gone, probably at work. Lillian stood by the window, coffee in hand, wearing that same silky robe. When she saw me, her smile froze mid-sip. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I stepped closer. You shouldn't have touched her dress. Her jaw tightened. You think you're the only one who's lost something? Your father's been drowning in debts, in guilt, and I'm the one holding him up while you cling to a pile of old lace. She was my mother, I snapped. She was his wife first, she hissed. And she's gone. I'm what's here now. Her words sliced straight through me, cruel and deliberate. I saw the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. I'd been right. She hadn't just burned the dress. She'd wanted to erase everything it stood for. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't empty-handed. I'd brought the box, the one that held the scorched pearl button. I placed it on the table between us. You left something behind, I said quietly. Her eyes darted to it, then to me. For the first time, she looked afraid. Where did you get that? I didn't, I said. It was sent to me. A silence fell between us. Then I watched it happen, the exact moment the mask slipped. Her face twisted, her hand trembling slightly as she whispered, He wasn't supposed to tell you. My heart stuttered. Tell me what? But before she could answer, the front door opened. Dad stood there, pale, eyes wide. He saw the box, saw her face, and his shoulders crumpled. It wasn't her idea, he said quietly. It was mine. I couldn't afford to keep the house, and your mother's things were the only assets left. Lillian just helped. Helped. The word echoed like a curse. I felt hollow, betrayed by blood and bond alike. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned and walked out. As I stepped outside, the wind off the sea brushed against me, carrying that faint, familiar scent of roses. It wasn't my mother forgiving me. It was her reminding me to let go of the dress, the lies, and the people who didn't deserve her memory. The end. Please like and subscribe for more interesting stories like this. What do you think of this story? Please comment below.